We have a few announcements this morning. The Board of Trustees has voted to make mask wearing optional while we are seated. On our way in and out of the sanctuary, please keep your masks on, and we will wear them while we are singing. Otherwise, if you're comfortable, you may take them off while you're seated. On Fridays, we will be ringing our church bell at 11 o'clock, along with other Cape Ann churches, to draw attention to the climate crisis. This effort began in Cambridge, and we want to spread the message that the planet is in its 11th hour. We did this last Friday and could hear multiple churches ringing their bells at the same time. If you'd like to help ring the bell, please let Reverend Janet know. This coming Sunday afternoon, the Gloucester Meeting House Foundation will present a live concert to celebrate the birthday of Johann Sebastian Bach here at the church. The event will be simulcast on the Foundation's YouTube channel and will be available afterwards for those unable to attend. The event is free and open to the public, and a collection will be taken to benefit Ukrainian relief efforts through the International Rescue Committee. The concert takes place next Sunday at 4:30. We have it on good authority that since it's a birthday party, there will be cake. Shep Abbott is organizing a group of people interested in learning more about the practice of nonviolence through reading and study. If you're interested, please contact Shep. As a reminder, we don't publish our phone numbers or email addresses to keep the information from getting into the hands of scammers. It's important for you to have a copy of the church directory. The latest 2022 edition is available, and there are copies on the table in the library and on the table at the back of the sanctuary. The next book in our congregational reading series is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. The book discussion will take place on April 8th. For more information about the book, please see the weekly email.
morning, everybody. What an intrepid bunch. Honestly, this morning between the black ice and the time change, I wasn't sure I'd be here by myself. So I'm very happy to see you all, as I always am, but especially today. We're so happy to be together. It's still feeling new and exciting. And for those of you who might be just getting to know us, we are proud of being the first Universalist congregation in the country, gathered originally in 1779. And I like to brag that technically we're older than the country. We welcome visitors and lifelong members, people of different beliefs or people of no traditional belief, and people of all sexual orientations and gender expressions. We care about the natural world, about justice for all, and about each other and all of you. Again, a warm welcome to visitors. If you'd like to get better acquainted and to learn more about our community, you can either sign the guest book in the vestibule, or you can fill out one of the yellow cards on the backs of the pews, and then you can just put it in the collection plate when it comes by. We aren't fully operational yet. We're trying to get as close as we can, so we're not having a traditional coffee hour downstairs, but we will be serving coffee out in the vestibule after the service, so we hope you'll stick around and meet some folks. I also want to warmly welcome all of you on our live stream this morning on our YouTube channel. We hope that it'll be a rewarding time for all of you. And as we try to do each week, we have attached the order of service to the weekly email that went out on Friday. So if you want to grab a chance right now, if you haven't already, to open that up on your computer, and then you can follow along with us with the service. I also invite folks at home to get a candle or a chalice prepared so that when we light our chalice here in the sanctuary, you can light yours, and we will be together in spirit, if not in person. And now we will deepen our hearts and our spirits for worship. We have brought back an opening hymn. This is our first Sunday this morning, singing 2 hymns. And so our opening hymn is number 38 in your gray hymnal, Morning Has Broken. And a reminder to put your masks back on. call to worship this morning is Psalm 95, a poem by Angela Magara. Come and sing. Let us sing to the rocks who stand with life. Let joy resound with a great noise. Life holds sacredness in her generous hand. Be not silent with your love. Sing of earth who holds the caves within, whose body breathes hills and mountains and throbs with the music of the sea. She lies open and waiting in every grain of dust. Celebrate her. Dance with pleasure, sing life. Join the rocks and trees in chorus. Wrap your legs around the mountains and let your lips caress the river. Join with life in this moment and sing. In the Unitarian Universalist faith tradition, we enter into worship with the kindling of our chalice. May its light guide our way forward in our lifelong search for meaning, connection, and justice. We take a moment now to affirm the covenant that we share with one another. The words are printed in your order of service. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. Life is a gift for which we are grateful. We gather in community to celebrate the glories and the mysteries of this great gift. There is a war raging far from here. It is far from here, but the Ukrainian people are held closely in our hearts in these days as they resist a ruthless invader. And so this morning and on Sundays, until peace is restored, we will light a candle for peace. It was 2 years ago this week, March 15th, 2020, that we held our last in-person service here in the sanctuary. And it's hard to get our minds around that, to think about everything that has happened since then, all the changes and all the losses. To prepare for this morning's service, I went back and I looked at my remarks from that Sunday as I tried to get us ready for whatever we were facing 2 years ago today. I mentioned that I hoped that we would be back in time for Easter. I just didn't say which Easter of which year. And I promised that we would continue to hold services every week, but I didn't know yet how exactly we would show them to you. And I mentioned that we would be learning how to use a new technology called Zoom. Honestly, the world has changed. So this morning we're actually going to take a little bit of time to just stop and reflect on these last 2 years and to remember together the times before and think about the time now. And in a moment, I'm actually going to be reaching out and asking you all to share all your thoughts. Because I find that 2 years later, and with far too much time almost alone here in the sanctuary talking to a camera, that more than anything else, I'd like to hear your voices. We're going to begin with a poem that Holly will read, and then we'll talk.
Try to praise the mutilated world. by Adam Zagajewski. Try to praise the mutilated world. Remember June's long days and wild strawberries, drops of rosé wine, the nettles that methodically overgrow the abandoned homesteads of exiles. You must praise the mutilated world. You watched the stylish yachts and ships. One of them had a long trip ahead of it, while salty oblivion awaited others. You've seen the refugees going nowhere. You've heard the executioners sing joyfully. You should praise the mutilated world. Remember the moments when we were together in a white room and the curtain fluttered. Return in thought to the concert where music flared. You gathered acorns in the park in autumn, and leaves eddied over the earth's scars. Praise the mutilated world, and the gray feather of a thrush lost, and the gentle light that strays and vanishes and returns.
So many memories come back. I think about this time 2 years ago, and it started with things disappearing from the grocery stores, right? Hand sanitizer, I think, was the first thing to go, and cleaning supplies. And then, of course, the toilet paper. We haven't forgotten that. And then I remember the sounds of it all. The news shows every night with just the backdrop of sirens in New York City. And then the footage of, do you remember the Italian people who were hit so hard in the beginning and singing from their balconies to each other? Do you remember that? And then the applause for the healthcare workers when they would get off their shifts, and the folks in New York would be going outside and applauding for them. And we have lost something of that sense of camaraderie, sadly. But people remarked on the quietness in the cities and hearing birdsong. And the air pollution lifted as we stopped driving. So there are so many things to remember and to hold on to. And so at this point, what I'd like to do is there it is, yes, to invite you to either raise your hand or stand up, and we'll bring you a mic. And if there's just something brief that you want to share about, what has happened for you in the past 2 years, how you've changed, what you'll remember, what stands out for you, I invite you to just share your thoughts with us.
I'm Shep Abbott, and I just was thinking about getting old. I got old in the last 2 years. I finally had to admit that my memory isn't as good as it used to be, and it's not getting any better. But it's a new and rewarding challenge.
I'm thinking this morning of 2 years ago, I had a full band and had a wonderful show over at Magma, and then everything shut down, the band dissolved, and yes, I switched ways of creating, but I grew into this sense of not having regular rehearsals, not having a voice, led me to feelings of, why do I do what I do? Who cares that I stopped singing? And I had to really settle, who am I if I don't sing? And I found that, and then 2 weeks ago, someone came in where I work at the Common Crow, and a woman came in and invited me to share my voice for the Take Back the Night, which is put on by the Gloucester Coalition for the Prevention of Domestic Abuse, Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault, and that's happening April 7th on a Thursday night at Unity on Elm Street, and I have a voice, and so I've been singing. I had to build up my calluses again, and I had to remember the lyrics of the song. And now that I don't have a band, I've got to rework the guitar so that it sounds full without the melodic bass line. So I'm adapting, and I'm finding my voice again. So thank you.
I'm not done. Exactly. I just want to express my gratitude to the members of this congregation, in particular Carl and Pat, and please forgive me if I forget anyone, of course, Reverend Janet, but there's a whole crew of people that got the Zoom thing off and running and all of the technology that had to be done, and that was an enormous effort. I mean, that was like really huge. And I just want to express my gratitude to those folks who took that on. It's impressive, and I really, really appreciate it.
Well, the crisis was tempered by the fact that Gail was retiring and we were moving from Nashville after 15 years. So my biggest memory is getting my first COVID test at a stadium in Nashville to honor my cousin's request that I get tested before I stayed overnight with her in the Philadelphia area on my first wagon load of stuff from Nashville to Gloucester. And then there was something else, but I've forgotten. I'm in Shep's league.
It'll come back. I like to say that the last 2 years have been measured in dog years. So for those of you who feel as though this time has aged you, it's because it's really been 14 years.
So my name is Michael. Hi. And I think one of the things that has been most stressful for me is where I work at Salem Hospital, and I have to wear the mask for 8 to 9 hours each shift. So when I'm ready to leave at 7:30 in the morning, I just rip that mask off, and it's mandatory, and it still is. But I'd just like to add a comment as well about something that Janet just said like 5 minutes ago about remembering 2 years ago when we weren't driving as much. And maybe this is just a suggestion. It may not happen, or it may. That's what we need to do now. I think we all drive, or most of us, and we all know that gas has gone sky high. And in relation to that war, we're not directly involved. We're offering equipment and monetary assistance, but we're all Americans here, and I assume we're all patriotic, and that if we did that once, we didn't drive a lot during 2 years ago because we couldn't. So I'm not saying do that exactly, but if we had to, maybe we could reduce our driving again, because the prices are just going to keep going up. And that's just a comment that I wanted to make.
Thank you.
I'm Carl, and in the spirit, I think, of what Michael said, I'm thinking now of benefits that I've unexpectedly experienced from these couple of COVID years. And that is that at our family reunion 2 years ago, in the first summer of COVID, most of the family didn't come to the family reunion, and one of the few who did was my brother William. And Sally and I had the rare experience of having 3 meals a day with my brother. Normally in this reunion, he comes very late to the reunion, and there's so many other people there that, well, you don't get to see everybody that you really want to. And Sally and I, at that time, had only been married for a year, and Sally didn't know, my new wife Sally, did not know my brother personally. And so she got to know William very well, and I got to reunite with him. And before COVID was over, William died from side effects of COVID. And so I'm very glad that I got to know him again, and that Sally got to know him, partly because of COVID, and strangely that COVID was implicit in his death.
Hello? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Usually at that reunion, there were 2 tables with 20 people, and I could hear nothing or nobody. But 2 years ago, the family was so nervous about COVID, they had meals delivered to their cottages, and Carl and William and I were the 3 who didn't care, and it was such a blessing. I also want to add that I loved from this whole time Zoom, because my life was, I grew with it, and people who I, in my Qigong class, met 2 or 3 times a week on Zoom, I would see someone who I really agreed with, one of those squares of people, and got in touch and went and walked quarries and did things that were safe. And I never would have had that experience otherwise. So I've made friends, and it's been marvelous.
Morning, I'm Jay. The thing that struck me the most 2 years ago was how difficult it was at Seacoast. I have a dear friend who's been there for 3 years now, and the nursing staff, it was extremely difficult for them to work, and it was difficult for the patients. They had, at various times, they had numerous people actually get COVID, and although they quickly had everybody inoculated as soon as possible. I'm responsible for my friend's estate, and during this time he's actually written a 3rd book and had it published. It's a small book about boomerangs. He's a world expert on boomerangs and kites, been to 87 different countries, and he's a fascinating person, and it's a great privilege for me to be able to work with him and help him. One of the things I've got to say is, under the present circumstances, the present bombardment of terrible news, I haven't been as apprehensive since the Cuban Missile Crisis. And I find that the biggest help in calming in reacting in a helpful way is to somehow bring joy into our lives. it's got to be that compartment. We have to fill that compartment as well as the sober reaction to the bad news. We've got to try to bring as much joy into our lives as possible. And right here is one of the biggest. Thank you.
Try to praise the mutilated world.
I'm Peggy. I love this church. Really, just listening to everybody. So I want to piggyback on what Sally said, because I also found that using Zoom, our new technology, that it enabled me to recreate bonds to my West Coast family. And so we did a lot of discussions and family gatherings all on Zoom. And, you know, it was less than, but in fact, my sister had died, and we were going to have a family gathering in memory of her, and then it wasn't possible to gather, and so we did it on Zoom, and we said goodbye to my sister on Zoom. So the other thing I wanted to sort of add to was what Jay said, and for me, this period of time has almost been a good time. It has not. I've just have enjoyed being by myself. I'm an introvert, and I'm lots of reading and lots of things to listen to. But the tragedies, and Jay mentioned Seacoast, and that's true of all hospital and nursing situations. And so I just am grateful to be reminded of how awful it's been, since for some reason it's not been a bad situation for me. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Charles. Just a couple quick thoughts. One is that when COVID came on, we all had to sort of plug in and rediscover what home is. Some of you are familiar with the writings of Eckhart Tolle, and one of his wonderful quips is that he's lived with 2 Zen masters in his lifetime, both of them cats. And because of the fear that came with COVID, the fear of getting sick and the fear of dying, we all withdrew and tried to follow the protocols and do what we could. But that fear also was something that we blithely tended to forget in our previous lives, not really acknowledging the fact that we are all going to die. And I think part of what brings us to church and brings us together is looking deeply into what life means and recognizing that death is a part of life. And there's a wonderful Bach chorale that is named A Voice Saith All Are Mortal. And I think as a society, we blocked out that whole thing for years and years and years. And we finally had to come face to face with it, with our own mortality. And I'm convinced this is why people aren't going back to their old jobs and why people are reorganizing their lives for things that matter more. So out of all of the tragedy, there has been some wonderful growth, I hope, that's come out of it, at least for me, and I know for my family and friends here at the church.
I'm Dick. I remember in March of 2020, it was a warm month, and my son and his family were coming back from snowboarding, and they happened to be with us, and suddenly they were with us for 2 months before they went back to New York City and Brooklyn. And during that time, my wife Doris and Seth put a full, cleaned the cellar unbelievably, and they also cleaned the garden and expanded it. And it was a wonderful time. We got closer in that time. And then we began to have the losses. Sewell Hayes, who frequented this church, died in Denmark, one of the first deaths of COVID. And his brother lives next door. And of course, my wife passed away, and we all understand that. And then Jim Scholl had a tragic stroke and has lost 50% of his capacity, but he's still a joyous person on occasion, and loves life. So I'm similar to Charles and Jay. I feel very appreciative of this time, coming to some new realizations about values, relearning a lot of things. And finally, I think the struggles bring us together. So the struggle against COVID, the struggle for climate, of which I'm very committed, and now the struggle for democracy. And I think we have to, I teared up this morning listening to the news and listening to Martha Raddatz interview some Americans who'd gone back to Ukraine to fight. And I thought of just the immensity of it. This is a turning point in the history of the world. This is bigger than 9/11. And we'll be learning about that for a long time. Thank you.
If there's a single word that describes what we've been through, it's one of my favorite: discombobulation. And listening to these messages have really been very heartening, very, very supportive. My mind went back to more than 50 years ago when I first came to Gloucester. And we had a terrible storm in February of 1969. And we're snowed in by 30 inches of snow in roughly 27 hours, to the point where the city of Gloucester found itself unable to dig itself out, ended up calling in the Army Corps of Engineers. Actually, they were sent in by FEMA. It was a very isolated storm, as it turned out. There were only 2 places in the country that went through it. One was Cape Ann, and the other was a little spot in Maine. And meteorologists made quite a study of this storm, it turns out, over the years, its unusual characteristics. The place essentially was, the island here was shut down for probably 2 weeks. The Boston and Maine Railroad lost a train, didn't know where it was. I was working at the Gloucester Times on Whittemore Street, and I found out where it was because the train crew came stomping into our office to use our telephone to let the world know where they were, to let management know where they were. And they had parked it on the bridge where it would not get snowed in. And they were using the self-powered Budliner cars, going, if your memory goes back far enough, and they had enough fuel that they could keep warm by just heating one car at a time and then moving back and forth. And they then stomped their way through to the Cape Ann market and got some food to eat. We were crippled. And after about 10 days, I got fed up and I said, you know, I'm going to leave the island somehow. And I got in my car. I was going to go across the then relatively new 128 bridge. And I got across and I discovered that it was our snow. It really didn't belong to anybody else. Things were not nearly so bad. And I went all the way down to the North Shore Shopping Center and I had lunch in the food court and I saw people and activity and so on and so forth. And I said, wow, things are bad here, but they're not bad everywhere. And I guess I just sort of take heart saying, you know, things pass, and we've gotten through this, and it's been a pretty rugged experience. It has been for me. Discombobulation underscores in my life over the last few years. And so the good news is there's life on the other side of the figurative bridge, and we move on, and we try to make it happen the best way possible. Dick, thank you so much for bringing up that perspective of the troubles that we're in right now. And Jay, thank you very much for reminding us to bring in joy.
Hi, I'm Steve. Thanks for having me again. As a musician, the past 2 years have given me the gift of time. I was basically forced to not work, and I leaned into it. It was a very hard time, but it was probably the most fruitful 2 years of my life. I went for walks in the woods by myself. I learned how to be by myself, which is not easy. And I also just kept practicing, you know. St. John's let me stay there and practice, and it was of mutual benefit. And practiced the organ. You know, I'm a guitar player, but I gained some new skills over the past 2 years, and I wouldn't be able to be a music director here if it weren't for these past 2 years. And I was able to notice the change in seasons, things I never really picked up on, you know, going in the woods so many times throughout the year. You get to see when the turtles lay their eggs, you get to see when the leaves fall and all those things. And I really value that sense of stopping all the distractions, you know, and just kind of paring down the different values that you hold, and just being able to spend the time however you'd like, you know. Well, not however you'd like, obviously, but you know, the bare essentials were always there, so I think I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Alyssa, and this time last year I was living with my boyfriend or fiance we'd been together for 8 years. We were planning our wedding. We got married on an animal sanctuary in October of 2020, and a couple months later he left me for a mutual friend of ours. And this was still in the middle of a pandemic, and you know, I moved in with my parents, and I couldn't taste food anymore. I couldn't move. My mom, you know, literally had to say, Alyssa, just it's time to get up, take a shower. And I needed so many people, and it was a time when people couldn't be around people. So I would literally like make, you know, schedule phone calls with friends and see friends at a distance. And Steve has been my best friend for 12 or 13 years. He's like, come to Gloucester, Gloucester's beautiful. And it is beautiful. I live in Lanesville now, and I'm still growing and still learning how to be a single person, but the pandemic showed me how tough things can really get, but how beautiful people can be, and I'm grateful for Gloucester, and I'm so glad to be here. And I had one loss, my husband, but I gained a lot. So that's my COVID story.
This has been amazing. This has just been, it's so wonderful to hear from all of you. And to bring us to a close, I wanted to just piggyback on what Carrie had to say, which was to just express gratitude to this community for everything that you have done and everything that you have been in the last 2 years. Carrie didn't mention herself and all the work that she put in here behind the scenes. Look around carefully and you'll see that the walls are in much better shape and that there are all kinds of projects and improvements that happened, and so thank you. Again, the tech crew, they kept us here every week, one way or another. I like to point out that in January we had 5 Sundays and we did them 3 different ways between blizzards and COVID and live streaming. We thought that would be a few weeks, and it was 2 years. And so to the tech crew, the music and liturgy team that is always trying to help me work through how best to do what we do. The lay leadership that has never stopped trying, from having to go to court remotely online to get a restraining order against the vandal, to learning how to apply for a payroll protection program loan and getting it, which helped our bottom line tremendously, to figuring out how to do annual meetings and pledge drives without seeing anybody. And all this happened. And you know who you are. But you never stopped. You never gave up. The Meeting House Foundation never missed a beat as far as I could figure out. And it has just gone on in different ways. And life does that for us. Life is like a stream, going downhill, and it encounters rocks, and the bed of the stream has to shift. And we've been doing that, well, for over 200 years, certainly, but particularly in the last couple of years. So I am grateful beyond measure for all of you. So thank you. And then Holly has something to say about our community to finish this off.
My thoughts after 2 years of COVID. Are we all in this together? We, you and me, everyone we know, everyone we don't know, everyone like us and everyone not like us, everyone on our minds and everyone we've never thought about. All of us are in this. This present moment, this pickle, this peril, this pandemic, this planet, together. In our common humanity, we share vulnerability. We share susceptibility to illness, yes, but also worry about our warming planet and shock at the resurgence of war. We yearn for world togetherness of a different kind, of unity, cooperation, and common purpose. Alone, we would become weary and overwhelmed. But in this church, this community, this shared commitment to care and compassion, we are not alone. We are together.
I am very mindful of the time. And so we will we will carry forward here, but I'm going to eliminate most of the remarks that I had planned for later in the service. So we won't, like I just said, we will just adjust. But thank you all for preaching the sermon for us this morning. And now I'd like to invite us into a time of stillness and prayer and meditation. I think that with all the hard news and all the noise in our lives, we need times of stillness. And so let's just pause in this moment and remember that the word for breath and that the word for spirit is the same, ruah. So let's take a moment to breathe together. And after all the time that we have spent alone, to think about pausing in silence and to join our breath, our spirit, into this sacred time and place. Spirit of life, God of many names and of no name, we pause here in this moment, joining our hearts and our spirits, hoping and praying for peace. We have seen so much anger, so much hostility, so much hardening of hearts toward one another in the past 2 years. We have watched as our society cannot agree on basic measures to keep one another safe from illness. And now we watch, feeling helpless, as a ruthless country invades a neighboring nation wanting only to flourish independently. We remember, too, that Ukraine is not the only place where violent oppression has been forced on neighbors and on fellow citizens. We pray that hearts may be softened and that people all over the world will learn to see each other as fully human and to see each other through soft eyes. We pray that those with hearts turned to stone can become merciful, can lay down their arms, can remember to love. And we pray today for the softening of hearts closer to home as well, as we watch states such as Texas and Florida pass legislation to silence LGBTQ students and teachers, and to try to make it impossible for parents of transgender children to seek gender-affirming care. May people's eyes be opened to the humanity so that all may be treated with love and compassion. Even in the midst of horror and sadness, we pause to remember those close to home, loved ones who are in need of our prayers and our loving embrace. May they feel supported and held by our love. And even here in this time of grief and anger, may we remember always to be grateful for the return of the light, for the tiny glimpses of spring, for the return to our lives of connection and community that have been suspended for so long. All this we ask in your name, which we know as love, as we enter into silence. Now more than ever, it matters that we are here. More than ever, our churches have important roles in our lives as we struggle to regain our normal life. More than ever, this community of faith, this place of memory and hope, provides the roots and the wings for us to speak and to act on behalf of those whose voices are not heard. We are here today because of the love and the faith of all those who have gone before us. We carry on the work that they began and will shepherd the story forward for those who will follow us. For the life and the health of this congregation and its ministries, this morning's offering will now be gratefully received. Blessings upon the givers and upon your gifts. From here on, we'll pretty much throw out the order of service. I don't want to keep you. I just wanted to shorten my remarks as much as I can and say that, that our theme for the month of March is renewing faith. And what a challenging thing this is for this time in our lives as we think that how many times have we thought we were emerging from the pandemic only to be slammed back into it? And now just as we're emerging again, the war began, the invasion of the Ukraine, and it would be understandable to be in despair. And it's been hard for me over the last couple of years because I've struggled so hard watching people's behavior and watching us make the same mistakes we made in the pandemic 100 years ago. We just doesn't feel as though we've learned much. And I've been disappointed repeatedly by what I see as some of the absolute worst of human nature emerging. People misbehaving in public and on airplanes, and yelling at teenagers working in stores about mask requirements, and it's not been a good time. So as I said, this month we will be taking a look at faith and what faith means in the midst of all this. And I've decided to not say much more than that today, except that to say that I always want to expand everyone's view of what faith is. Faith is not about a particular religious belief. Faith is bigger than that. And so often people will say, I have no faith. And I want to say that everybody has faith in something, because the root of the word really is tied to loyalty and to commitment. Think of the Marines, semper fidelis, always faithful. We all have things that that we have faith in, things that we are committed to, things that we are loyal to. And I invite you over this next week to think about that for yourself and to ponder what it is that you have faith in. And it might be as simple as a day like today when we reset the clocks and the sun came up at a new time, but we knew that was going to happen, didn't we? And we know that spring is coming. And we believe in science and gravity. Maybe we start there for some of you. So at any rate, I'm going to just tell one short story that to illustrate my own faith in the generative and sustaining sources of life that I see all around us. And I saw that this week. As I'm sure most of you know, there was an atrocity committed in Ukraine. There was a bombing of a maternity hospital. And I'm sure many of us saw the images of pregnant and laboring women being brought out of this hospital. And there were images of one young woman, who was visibly injured. And then a couple days later, there was a video clip on the news of this woman with her new baby. There was a newborn baby girl whose parents named her Veronica. Veronica means she who brings victory. So, we never know what will emerge from the rubble of life, but I'm holding to that image of that new baby girl, and life emerging from just the worst possible circumstances. And sometimes faith is what we have to hold on to get through the times like this. So I'm going to leave it at that. But I just hope that, until we can pick up this conversation again next week, that you will be able to spend some time thinking about your own faith and what you have faith in. And my hope is that you will see that faith is available to you, that faith is bigger than all of us, and it's there for us. So may it be so. I think that we will skip to our closing hymn, which is number 396 in the gray hymnal. I Know This Rose Will Open, which you heard Alyssa sing so beautifully a minute ago. We're going to pick it up and sing it with her. May you go from here with faith, faith in one another, faith in the power of communities to heal and to hold us, faith in the ultimate power of justice, the triumph of justice over oppression, faith that the light will extinguish the darkness, and faith in the love that will not let us go. Amen. And now, folks at home, I invite you to hold up your candle, and together we will blow them out as we say the words to extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Go in peace and return in love. Amen.